I was a junior in high school back in 2009. One normal school day, I was sitting in my English class. It was close to the end of the year, and we were finishing up final projects, which meant we needed access to the school laptops. The school library had been shut down for the week due to some sort of damage or renovation work. I honestly do not remember all the specifics about it. Even so, I was fairly certain the laptop carts were still kept in the storage room at the back of the library. My teacher asked the class if anyone wanted to go get the cart. I really needed to use the bathroom, so I volunteered since it gave me a good excuse to go. After stopping at the bathroom, I headed down to the library. All the lights inside were turned off. It did not look like anyone was in the library at all. It was fairly dark, but enough light came in through a few windows to allow me to see where I was walking. As I mentioned before, the laptop carts were usually stored in a separate room at the far back of the library. There was a glass window that allowed you to see into that room from the main library area, and it was extremely dark inside. I tried the door handle, but it was locked. At that point, I stood there unsure of what to do. I did not really want to walk all the way back to class to tell my teacher. I scanned the library, hoping there might be at least one staff member somewhere. That is when I heard a noise coming from the opposite side of the library. As I moved closer, it sounded like a steady clicking noise. It seemed to be coming from one of the study rooms where classes were occasionally held. The door to that room was slightly open, but it was dark inside as well. There were windows that looked into the room, so instead of walking straight in, I tried to peer through the glass from the main library area. I was about 80% sure I could see someone standing in the back corner of the small room. I nudged the door open a bit more and called out into the room. My voice echoed slightly. I flipped the light switch, but nothing happened, confirming that the power in the library was off. I stepped inside the room, feeling confused as to why no one answered me. I wanted to be sure that what I was seeing was actually a person. It is difficult for me to describe exactly what I was looking at. From the doorway, it honestly looked like a human-shaped figure. A head, a body, everything was there. I did not even own a cell phone at that time to use as a light source. I walked farther into the room, but I stopped once what I was seeing started to feel deeply wrong. It no longer looked like a person. It looked like some sort of creature, a human-like creature. I was certain that he or it or whatever it was had its attention on me. I could see what looked like a face, and its head appeared to be at least twice the size of a normal human head. And that was not even mentioning its height. It had to be 7 or maybe 8 feet tall. It stood perfectly still, just like I did. It was not until I noticed movement in the corner of my vision that my heart dropped and I bolted out of the room and out of the library. I was gasping for air, my heart pounding. A teacher I recognized named Miss Carp was walking down the hallway, and I panicked and asked her to come with me into the library to look. She immediately asked in a strict tone why I was even in the library when students were not allowed inside that week. I explained that I had been sent to retrieve the laptops, and without softening her tone, she told me all the laptop carts had been moved to the presentation room. Apparently, I had completely spaced out when my teacher said that earlier. I still asked Miss Carp to come into the library so I could show her what I had seen. When she finally followed me back, there was nothing at all in that back room, and the light inside the room was suddenly working. Miss Carp was clearly irritated, and she obviously did not believe me or assumed I imagined it. I eventually returned to class with a laptop cart from the presentation room and told my teacher I had gone to the library by accident. I never really talked about what I saw with anyone else because I did not want to sound ridiculous or insane. I do not know if I believe in ghosts or paranormal stuff, but I genuinely have no idea what I could have seen in that room. Yes, eyes can trick you sometimes, but not to that extent. I saw something large standing in the corner of that room, something that was not human. I attended a fairly small commuter college in Delaware. During my freshman year, my schedule was set up terribly. I would arrive on campus at 3 p.m., take a couple of classes, then have a 2-hour break before my next class, and I would not leave until around 9. I will admit that during my early college years, I was pretty antisocial. I could have spent time meeting people in the food hall, or joined clubs, or even just gone to the library during my breaks. But for my last class twice a week after that long break, I had class in a basement room in one of the business buildings. That basement only had that room and one other classroom, and most of the time there was nobody else down there. Usually I would go straight down, eat my food in the classroom, then work on homework on my laptop for the next couple of hours. Sometimes I would just sit there playing games on my phone or watching videos. Like I said, I was very antisocial. One day in particular, I felt lazy before class and did not prepare any food, so I had to walk to the cafeteria hall to buy a sandwich. I sat by myself at a table and started eating, but I quickly felt uncomfortable when I realized I was the only person sitting alone while most others were with friends. So I wrapped up my sandwich and decided I would just eat it in the classroom and wait there like usual. I walked back out into the dim hallways, headed to the basement of the business building, and finished eating there. Before I could finish the sandwich, I heard the door slowly creak open behind me. I was sitting in the back corner seat closest to the door, so when I turned around, I was nearly face to face with a guy I had never seen before. He looked maybe a couple of years older than me. He had an unkempt beard, wore glasses, and had a bit of a stomach. I seriously had never seen him in that class before. We locked eyes awkwardly for a moment before I looked away and kept eating. I immediately thought something felt off about him, like he was strange, or something was not quite right. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him sit down at the desk directly next to mine. I wanted so badly to ask why he chose that seat, but instead, I avoided looking at him and tried to ignore it. I checked the time on my phone. There was still an hour and a half before class began. I looked up again, not directly at him, but slightly to the side, just enough to see that he was staring straight at me. That was enough for me. I finished the sandwich, grabbed my bag, and left the classroom. I did not care where I went, maybe a bench outside, anywhere as long as I was not there anymore. When I stepped back outside into the dark, I scanned the area looking for a place to sit for a bit. I walked toward a more wooded part of campus and sat on a bench beneath a bright lamp post. It was cold since it was late fall, but I figured I could tolerate it. Very few students passed through that area of campus. It sat near a small, rarely used parking lot surrounded by trees on all sides. Suddenly, I heard the snapping and crunching of leaves. I looked around and noticed something. Standing between two pine-like bushes was a person. I stood up and leaned forward slightly, trying to get a clearer view. It was the same guy again. He was not even trying to hide his face. I was about to leave once more when he stepped through the bushes and said hi. He began talking to me, but the way he spoke felt strange. He over-enunciated every word, if that makes sense. He started asking me tons of questions about myself, like whether I went to school there, what my major was, where I worked, and what I did for fun. It was incredibly uncomfortable, but I tried to be polite by asking him a few questions back. We ended up sitting there together for a bit. Eventually, he asked for my phone number. I do not know why I gave it to him. I guess I was just trying to be kind. Then things became even stranger. He asked me where I lived. At first, I answered with my hometown, but he responded, no, like where do you live? I hesitated, unsure of what to say. I repeated the same answer. Then he asked, no, like what is your address? I did not even question why he wanted to know. I just said I had to go and quickly walked away. When I glanced back, the guy was following me. I had no idea what was wrong with him, but he completely terrified me. I skipped my class that night and drove straight home. I collapsed onto my bed and started working on homework. After finishing a short paper, I checked my phone and saw it was filled with messages from an unknown fake number. There had to have been around 20 texts. They were all from that guy. It started with "Hey," then slowly turned into "You have a nice house." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I texted back, "Go away or I am calling the police." Then there was a knock at my window. The shade was down, so I could not see who it was. Along with the knock, I heard a muffled but familiar voice say, "Open the window." I yelled that I was calling the cops. After that, everything went silent. My parents were not home, so I really did call the police. Nothing else happened before they arrived. I showed them the messages and explained everything that had happened. They told me it would be best to see if it continued, since the guy had not made any direct threats yet. They left, telling me to call again if he returned and to block his number. The following day, the college sent a message to all students, warning about sightings of a dangerous young man seen carrying a knife. Classes were canceled, and police searched the entire campus. I called to share my experience and was asked to repeat it to the police. As far as I know, that disturbing guy was never caught. I do not know why he chose me or what his intentions were. But this is the story of how I nearly lost my life in my own home because of someone I met at school. Back when I was in high school, my friend group had around 10 people in it. Still, it was uncommon for all of us to hang out together at the same time. On one gloomy and overcast school day, my friends Jared, Michelle, Christina, and I were sitting together in history class. We had a substitute teacher that day, and were not doing much work, so most people were just chatting. Our high school building was very old, built sometime in the 1930s. There was also a second building sitting deeper in the woods that had apparently been used back in the 40s as a daycare or preschool. It happened to be on school property, but they never demolished it. The structure was so run down and neglected that vines had grown up along the exterior walls. The four of us started talking about how we should break into it that night since it was Friday. We did not tell the rest of our friends because it would be harder to pull off with a larger group. Eventually, night came. We snuck onto the school grounds using a less visible path to avoid security. From there, we made our way into the woods without any trouble. Soon we reached the building, which sat inside a fenced area. Jared and I lifted the girls up and over the fence. Then we climbed over ourselves. The building was roughly twice the size of a regular house. There was no chance we were the first people to ever do this. We walked around all four sides, searching for a way inside. There were several windows, and then we came across the front door. It was locked, of course. Jared and I decided to break one of the windows while the girls stood watch. Once again, we helped the girls climb inside first. Jared went in next, and I followed last. It took some effort for me to fit through. I was the biggest one out of all of us. I ended up cutting my hands on some of the broken glass. After finally getting inside, I looked around the dark and freezing room where I landed. I noticed it resembled an old-fashioned classroom. Then I realized my friends were not in there with me. I started shouting Jared's name over and over. I left the small classroom and stepped into a narrow, decaying hallway. There were several open doors leading to similar rooms. At that point, my main concern was finding my friends. I did not understand why they had moved so far ahead so quickly. I kept calling out their names, but no one answered. I checked each tiny classroom until I reached one where I saw Jared standing in the corner. He was staring out the window. I said, "Dude, what are you doing? And why did you not wait for me?" He just turned and looked at me, I think. I could not meet his eyes in that darkness. I looked back down the hall and called both girls' names. Right then, I heard someone stepping on something loudly further down the narrow corridor. I walked through the clutter of random school items scattered on the floor and reached the last classroom on the left. The moment I looked inside, someone jumped out and screamed right in my face. I almost had a heart attack. It was Jared. Christina and Michelle stepped out from behind me, laughing hysterically. They told me they had planned to hide and scare me a few minutes before we went inside. I playfully shoved Jared, but my heart was still pounding from the scare, and it began beating even faster because I remembered the figure I had seen in that other classroom. I told them all to be quiet, and I whispered that I saw someone else and thought it was Jared. I motioned for them to follow me back to that room. However, whoever had been in the corner was gone. I stepped inside the classroom, but it looked empty. Then I heard one of the girls gasp. I stepped back toward them and saw what they were staring at. She was pointing at the crack between the classroom door and the frame. Someone was standing behind the door with their face pressed between the crack. The two girls screamed, and Jared yelled, "Let us get out of here." We all ran back to the window we had climbed through. I was the last to climb out, and I cannot describe how terrified I was that someone would grab my legs and pull me down while I was climbing. But I managed to get out. We jumped over the fence again and ran back to Christina's house. It did not make any sense. The door to the building was locked, and the broken window was the only open one. So how could that man have gotten inside? And more importantly, what was he doing in there? We told the rest of our friends, and rumors spread quickly about the building. I am sure other people went in after that, but we never went near that place again.